And she gets on with her life. And she raises those kids by herself. She takes them to the baseball games and the soccer games and the ballet. She works during the day. She goes to school at night. She's up early in the morning taking her kids to the carpool. And years go by and she finally gets her degree. Within 1 year of her degree, she scores a new job in Austin, Texas, one of the fastest growing cities in the United States. And she gets a great job and she's working with great people. And all of a sudden, within a year, she falls in love with the senior vice president of the company. And they travel the world, and then they buy a house in the south of France. And she spends her summers in France and her winters in Austin. Her kids get married and have grandkids. They graduate from college. Now you approach this woman 20 years later, and you say to her, yes, but your husband left you 20 years ago. What do you think she's going to say? That was the best thing that ever happened to me. You see, a memory without the emotional charge is called wisdom, and that's the name of the game here. So then, if you're living by the same emotion every day and you programmed it into your body to become the mind of that emotion, then you're viewing your life through the lens of the past. And when we begin to free the body from the chains of those emotional addictions, and the body settles into the present moment, and it's liberating energy, that's called joy. And that's when you see a whole new landscape. You see possibility that you never saw before because you're no longer viewing it through the past. How many people are with me? Now, are you still geniuses? Poke the person next to you, please. You're geniuses, right? So think about this. If you were thinking and feeling and feeling and thinking in the same cycle, according to our model, if emotions are the record of the past, then your body's not having any new experiences, and because it's not having any new experiences, it's not getting any chemical feedback from the environment. You with me? So everything stays the same, right? Now, if you were to take out one cell of your body, a skin cell, and you were to stretch the DNA out of that skin cell, it would be 6 feet tall, okay? If you took out all the DNA out of your entire body and you stretched it out from end to end, it would go to the sun and back 150 times. You with me? If you took all of DNA on everybody on the planet, the 7 billion people, and you scrunched it together, it would fit in a grain of rice. Now, your body is a protein-producing machine. You with me? Muscle cells make muscle proteins called actin and myosin. Skin cells make skin proteins called collagen and elastin. Thyroid cells make thyroid proteins called thyroxine. Immune cells make immune proteins called antibodies. You with me? So your body's a protein-producing machine. Now, in order for your body to make a protein, a gene has to be switched on, or a gene has to be activated. You with me? So, when they did the Human Genome Project, they went like this. They said, okay, let's see, there's 100,000 proteins that make up the body, so there should be about 100,000 genes in each cell. Well, it takes about 40,000 regulatory proteins to make those 100,000 proteins, so it's 140,000 proteins in the body. We should have 140,000 genes. How many people are with me? But one-to-one correlation. Well, when they did the Human Genome Project, guess what? We only expressed 23,000 genes. We have way more proteins than we have genes, which means then that each individual gene can have thousands of different variations. You with me? So then, 23,000 genes, you are 98% chimpanzee, 300 genes away from a chimp, 70% rat, some more than others, but roughly 70%. You have there are more genes in an apple than you have. So then, if an organism is facing adverse conditions in its environment, think about the Galapagos Islands. All of a sudden, this island just breaks away, or Madagascar breaks away from the typical environment. And the organisms now have to embrace the new conditions in the environment. With the changing conditions in the environment, the organisms have to behave differently and make different choices in order to adapt to those conditions. You with me? Poke the person next to you, quick. So if the organism's able to adapt and change its behaviors, it should have a new experience, right? And then the new experience produces new chemical information from the environment, and that chemical information then begins to signal the gene. And so by the redundancy of the same signal from the same experiences in the environment, you keep knocking on the genetic door, all of a sudden the gene turns on and it makes a new protein. So if it's cold temperatures, all of a sudden the organism, through the series of exposures, has thicker fur. Fur is a protein. If it's predators chasing prey, they have longer legs. If it's altitude, hemoglobin binds to oxygen more. It's a protein. If it's current, bigger tail fin, it's a protein. So then, as the organism begins to adapt to the experience, then, it begins to produce different chemical feedback through experience that begins to signal the gene. So then if emotions are the end product of past experiences, and you're thinking and feeling in the same cycle, you're keeping the same genes turned on and the other genes turned off, and now you're headed for your genetic destiny. How many people are with me? You got that, yes? So then here's my question. What if nothing new is happening in your life? Can you signal the gene ahead of the experience? That's called epigenetics. So then, if you take a group of diabetics and you have them watch a comedy show for 1 hour, and you measure their blood sugar levels before and after they've eaten a meal and they watch a funny show, that within 1 hour they signal 23 new genes that begin to regulate their blood sugar. Turn on new genes, turn off old genes, just by changing their internal state. If you take a group of stressed out people that are executives, and you teach them how to relax for 6 weeks, to meditate and to breathe, they regulate 1,561 new genes. But if you're thinking and feeling in the same way every single day, you keep the same genes turned on and the other genes turned off, and now you're headed for your genetic destiny. And in fact, if you keep signaling the same gene with the same emotion that makes the same protein, sooner or later the gene's going to wear out. And it's going to begin to make a cheaper protein. So then all aging is the result of improper protein production. What happens when you age? What happens to your muscles, your joints, your bones? It's all protein. Your hair, your skin. So then, if you could signal the gene ahead of the environment, then you may have the key to begin to change your health. How many people are with me? Yes? And so when we do the meditations in our workshops, and by the way, the advancing workshops, we're in and out of meditation all day long. You're changing beliefs and perceptions about yourself and your life. You're reconditioning your body to a new mind. You're finding the present moment. We're tuning into possibilities in the quantum field. It's an event where you participate. So our students begin to understand then that they could signal the gene ahead of the actual experience. Then they don't have to wait for their healing to happen. All they have to do then is move into that state of being and bring the elevated emotion, and that new emotion then is information that begins to activate new genetic expressions. Now, the expression of proteins is the expression of life. So then, when a person changes their internal state, they begin in a matter of moments to signal new genes in new ways. You take a group of people, who did this experiment where they took a group of men and they brought them to a retreat center north of Harvard University. And they told these men for 5 days to pretend like they were 22 years younger. That's it. And they measured their finger length and their range of motion and their IQ and their memory retention and their height and their weight. Measured all the range of motion of their spine, all these physiological functions. They measured their gait. And they set it up in the retreat center that there were pictures of Marilyn Monroe and Joe DiMaggio and Mickey Mantle, and there were songs playing all the time from, the great bands, the big orchestras, and they just pretended like they were 22 years younger. Well, the researcher, Ellen Langer, at the end of the experiment said, I was playing touch football with these guys. By the end, some of them throwing their canes down. Now, when they measured all of the values that they measured before they pretended like they were 22 years younger, they had longer fingers, they had more range of motion, they were taller, they had lost weight, they had scored 60% better on their IQ test just by pretending to be somebody else. So here's the question. Who are you pretending to be? Now, you have 3 brains. 3 brains in one that allow you to go from thinking to doing to being. Your thinking brain is your neocortex. You're listening to me right now with your neocortex. It's the seat of your conscious awareness. It's that walnut on the outside with all of its folds and valleys. And the neocortex plugs us into the environment, and it loves to learn information. And as you experience and you learn, you upgrade the hardware and the circuits in your thinking brain. You with me? Now, you read the book on how to ride the bicycle, how to dance the salsa, how to cook French cuisine, how to be more compassionate, how to forgive, and all that information is stored in your thinking brain. You with me? It's the intellect. It analyzes, it's the theologian, it's the philosopher. Now, if you take that knowledge and you apply it, or you personalize it, or you demonstrate it, it means you're going to have to modify your behaviors in some way and do something differently. So if you change your actions and you do something differently, then you should have a new experience. Would you agree? And a new experience then should reinforce the circuits in your brain that you understood intellectually, but then it would activate the second brain called the limbic brain or the emotional brain or the chemical brain, which is underneath the neocortex, and it produces a feeling or an emotion. You with me? Poke the person next to you, please. So then, you read the book on compassion by the Dalai Lama, and then you read the book by Mother Teresa on forgiveness, and you read the book about emotional intelligence, and you go to the workshop and you review your notes, and then you get on the teleclass seminar, and you're getting all this information in your analytical, intellectual, philosophical neocortex. And all of a sudden you start walking around in your life and you're saying, hey, you know what your problem is? You need to be more compassionate. You got a problem with compassion. Open your heart. Oh, and you over there, listen, you just need to forgive. Why hold on? And then, you need to get more emotionally intelligent. Shorten the refractory period. Come on, pick it up a little bit. And everybody is blown away by all of this knowledge that you're espousing. They're knocking on your door at work, asking you to administer to them. They want to know what you know, and everything's going really well, right? But then you're getting ready for the company Christmas party, You're putting lipstick on, you're getting ready, you got a little Motown playing, and all of a sudden, you get a call from your best friend. And she says, that person that betrayed you, the one that threw you under the bus, that talked about you and got the promotion and you didn't get it, she's at the Christmas party. Put down the phone. And all of a sudden, you start rehearsing in your mind how you are going to poison her wine when she's not looking. You think about going into the bathroom, locking the door, getting her in one of the stalls, wham, against the wall a few times. You start thinking about how you're going to embarrass her in front of everybody, and all of a sudden, you stop. And you think, oh no, I read the book on compassion. Damn it. Now I got to do something. And all of a sudden, you start to become conscious of your unconscious thoughts. You start to notice your knee-jerk behaviors. You start to become aware of those addictive emotions. And as you begin to observe them, you're no longer the program. You're the consciousness observing the program. And you begin to objectify your subjective self. And as you inhibit those thoughts, behaviors, and emotions, nerve cells that no longer fire together, and you begin to silence the circuits in your brain that are connected to the old self. And as you inhibit the thoughts that create the same feelings, you're no longer signaling the same gene in the same way. And all of a sudden, you start to think, what did I learn from those books, the teleclass, the seminar? What would Mother Teresa do? And all of a sudden, you begin to activate different networks of neurons in your brain from the knowledge you've learned. And as you begin to call up these different circuits, all of a sudden you do something very natural. You put yourself into the equation and you start to rehearse what you're going to do in the dinner. And very naturally, in a matter of seconds, you begin to cause your brain to fire in new sequences, in new patterns, in new combinations. And whenever you make your brain work differently, you're changing your mind. And as you remind yourself of who you no longer want to be, and you remind yourself of who you do want to be, you begin to install the hardware in your brain. You begin to prime the brain and begin to activate circuits and put them in place so that you can use them when you get into the dinner. You with me? So then you're sitting there and you're going, all right, what did the book say? See myself in her? Oh my God. All right, what else? Stay in the present moment. And you start going down this list and you very naturally start thinking about you doing that. And the moment you begin to mentally rehearse doing it, plan your behaviors, you begin to cause the brain to believe that the experience is occurring. Because when you're truly focused, the brain doesn't know the difference between the experience out there and the experience in here. And now you're upscaling your hardware and you have circuits in place to use when you get to the dinner. How many people are with me? And so now you walk into the dinner. You're reminding yourself who you no longer want to be. You're reminding yourself who you do want to be. You're thinking of Mother Teresa. You're thinking of the Dalai Lama. And all of a sudden, you get your behaviors to match your intentions. You get your actions equal to your thoughts. You get your mind and body working together. And all of a sudden, in the midst of your enemy, you have a new experience. And you do exactly what the book says, and your heart opens, and you feel compassion, you feel love, you feel freedom. And the moment you feel that emotion, you are now chemically teaching your body to understand what your mind has intellectually understood. So we could say knowledge is for the mind and experience is for the body. And in that moment, you are embodying knowledge. The word becomes flesh, and you're signaling new genes in new ways, and that second brain called the limbic brain is whipping up a batch of chemicals for you to begin to understand, no longer philosophically what it meant, but now you begin to understand it on a visceral level, and you are teaching your body emotionally to understand what your mind is intellectually understood. How many people understood? And now it's no longer philosophical. Your heart is open, and you're seeing through the lens of a different being because your mind and body are working together. But it's not enough to do it once. You can't forgive your enemy one time and expect to be on the stained glass windows in church. You got to be able to repeat the experience. You got to be able to do it over and over and over again. You got to be able to do it so many times that you neurochemically condition your body to memorize compassion as well as your conscious mind. And when you can get your mind and body working together, or your body to become the mind of compassion, or your mind and body to merge, now you're in a state of being. And when you're in a state of being, you activate that third brain called the cerebellum, the seat of your subconscious. Now you've practiced it so many times that you no longer have to consciously think about it. It's innate in you. It's who you are. As a matter of fact, you know how you do it, but you don't even know how, because it's subconscious. It's automatic. It's effortless. It's second nature. And when we get to that point where we have that level of competence, we could say that we've memorized an internal neurochemical order that no person, no thing, no experience could move us from it. And that's what we call mastery. How many people are with me? So how many people here know someone who's mastered suffering? It doesn't have to be you. It could be anybody. And you say to them, hey, did you read the book I gave you? No. Hey, did you see the DVD? No. Hey, we're going downtown Austin. We're going to watch some great bands. We're going to have a couple drinks. You want to come? No. What are they saying? I've memorized this neurochemical order that no person, no thing, no experience will move me from it. Now, we use those same three brains to memorize altruistic states of being. And the quantum field only responds to who you're being. Not what you're thinking, not what you're feeling, but who you're being. They did an experiment where they took a group of people that were very, very talented in praying. They're good prayers. And they said, it's a skill. They said to these people, now look, we're going to set 3 vials of DNA out in front of you. And with all of your conscious intention, we want you to see this DNA unwinding or rewinding. And so they kept seeing the DNA winding and unwinding, winding and winding, winding and unwinding. At the end of the experiment, they checked the DNA, and guess what happened? Nothing. Intention, getting clear on what you want, a mindful process, did nothing to change the DNA. So then they said to the people, okay, move into an elevated mood. Feel goodwill and gratitude and joy. And just open your heart and just emanate this emotion into the field. So they kept doing it over and over again, over and over again. They checked the DNA, guess what happened? Nothing. Elevated emotion did nothing to change the DNA. But when they said to those people, we want you to see the DNA unwinding, and then we want you to get into the feeling, give thanks for the DNA unwinding before it unwinds. Guess what happened? 25% of the DNA unwound. You see, the thoughts that you think are like the electrical charge in the quantum field. And the feelings that you emote are the magnetic charge in the quantum field. And how you think and how you feel broadcasts an electromagnetic signature that influences every single atom in your life. The thought sends the signal out, and the feeling draws the event back. So it begs the question, what are you broadcasting on a daily basis? Because if you are living in a state of misery or suffering, and you're broadcasting that into the field every day, what you're saying is, oh, infinite creator of divine consciousness, I am in a state of suffering, and I am broadcasting the signature into the field. Bring me another reason to suffer, but bring it in a way that I least expect, that surprises me, that leaves no doubt that it's come from you so that I can suffer a little bit more. You see, we're not punished for our sins. We're punished by our sins. So then, what if you woke up in the morning, and instead of getting up and doing the same exact thing, the exact same time, and seeing the same people, what if you eliminated the external environment What if you put your body away because the change is to be greater than the body? And if the body's become the mind, then you have to retrain it. And what if you said, I'm not going to live in my predictable linear time? And you said, what is the greatest expression of myself that I can be today? Let me master this one day as a lifetime. And you said, let me remind myself of the thoughts that are connected to the old self, and I want to become so conscious of those unconscious thoughts, they would never slip by my awareness again. And what if you said, let me observe my behaviors. And just like you watching yourself doing a public speech or hitting a golf ball or hitting a tennis ball, if you can observe yourself, you'll self-correct. Wouldn't you agree? What if you said, let me just take a look at how I've been acting? And like Gandalf on the bridge, you said, you may not pass today. You may not pass ever again. And you made a decision with such firm intention that the amplitude of that decision carried a level of energy that was greater than the hardwired programs in your brain and the emotional addictions in your body. And your body responded to a new mind. And what if you said, these emotions that keep me anchored to the past, I will not drop to a lower denominator today. And you became clear of who you no longer wanted to be. You lit a match in a dark place. And then you said, how would greatness live today? How will I love? Can I be present? Can I open my heart? How will I behave? And you begin to think in new and unusual ways. And if by chance you're so caught up in your internal vision that the thought becomes the experience in your mind, and your body begins to produce the emotions ahead of the event, you're moving into a new state of being. Because how you think and how you feel creates a state of being. And now you're broadcasting a whole new electromagnetic signature into the field. And what if you said, I am not getting up from my meditation until I am this person? Now we're talking about greatness. And your body is bucking and kicking like an unbridled stallion. It's impatient, it's frustrated. Why? Because we trained it to be that way. And it wants to get up and open its eyes and do things to reaffirm the identity of the emotion that it's addicted to. And you're saying, stay, stay. Just like an animal trainer, the body is the animal. It's the servant to the mind. But when the body becomes the mind, the servant becomes the master. And most people think they're making all their choices with their conscious mind. They're making choices with their body mind. And so now, person is working on transformation. And the body is looking for its chemical rush. And it's sending signals up the spinal cord to the thinking brain. And it's looking, the thermostat in the brain, that's measuring the amount of chemicals of suffering or guilt or shame. All of a sudden, you're no longer thinking that way, and the body is craving those chemicals. It's modified its receptor sites. It's saying, hey, I've been doing this for 20 years. You think you're doing all this? I'm doing it for you. You're going to quit right now? And all of a sudden, it starts to send signals back to the brain, and all of a sudden, you hear those voices in your head. You're too much like your mother. You'll never change. Forget it. Start tomorrow. And you sit down with that body and you say, that's all you got? That's your best? That's it? Come on. And you say, come on. We're not getting up until we're in a state of joy or we are in a state of gratitude. And now you are conditioning the body to a new mind. And every time it wants to move to the past because it's emotional and frustrated or starts to anticipate the future, you bring it back to the present moment. Every time you do that, you're reconditioning your body to a new mind and you're liberating energy from particle to wave.